The Great Hall of the Galactic Coalition buzzed with quiet conversations. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat in their special chairs, each designed for their unique body shapes. The air smelled of different atmospheres mixed together, creating a strange but familiar scent that reminded everyone they were far from home. Cathara floated into the center of the hall. The Velen looked like living crystal, her body catching the light and throwing rainbows across the walls. But today those beautiful colors seemed dim and sad. Her people were dying and everyone in the room knew it. Honored representatives. Cathara's voice rang like wind chimes in a storm. My people face complete destruction. The machines we call Devourers have taken 17 of our worlds. They strip everything clean, the land, the water, the air. Nothing remains but empty rock floating in space. The Zephyrian ambassador stretched his golden wings. His people were proud warriors, but he shook his head slowly. The distance is too great. Our fleets cannot reach your territory in time to help. The Corvin representative, a being that looked like walking stone, agreed. Our military serves our own borders first. We cannot spare ships for such a distant threat. Even the trade consortium, whose merchants traveled everywhere for profit, declined to help. The cost would be too high, their speaker said. Our shareholders would never approve such an expense. Cathara's light grew dimmer. Then you will let an entire civilization die? The Devourers do not stop. When they finish with us, they will look for new worlds to consume. Your worlds. Perhaps, said the council speaker, but that is a problem for tomorrow. Today, we must be practical. In the back corner of the hall, Captain Lee Taman watched the debate with growing anger. He wore the simple blue uniform of the Human Defense Corps, marking him as one of the newcomers to galactic society. Most aliens still thought humans were violent primitives from a dangerous world. They barely tolerated human presence at coalition meetings. Next to him, Dr. Park Sora took notes on her tablet. She studied alien behavior and had seen this kind of meeting before. They will not help, she whispered to the captain. They are too afraid and too selfish. The council speaker looked around the room. Does any nation offer assistance to the Velen Republic? The question was asked with the tone of someone who already knew the answer. Captain Lee stood up. His movement was so sudden that several aliens jumped in surprise. Humans had a reputation for being unpredictable, and their presence always made other species nervous. The Human Defense Corps will answer their call, Lee said in a clear, strong voice. The hall fell completely silent. Even the translator machines seemed to pause in shock. The Zephyrian ambassador laughed, a sound like wind through metal tubes. Captain, your entire species has perhaps 50 warships. The Devourers command thousands. This would be suicide. When someone asks for help, we answer, Lee replied simply. That is what humans do. Dr. Park stood beside her captain. We have studied the reports from Velen space. The threat is real and immediate. If no one acts now, millions will die. The council speaker looked confused. In all his years of service, he had never seen a species volunteer for certain destruction. Captain Lee, you understand that the coalition cannot provide support for this mission? You would face the Devourers alone. We understand, Lee said. But we still choose to go. Cathara floated toward the human captain, her crystalline form brightening with hope for the first time in days. You would do this? Risk your lives for people you barely know? Lee looked at the Velen ambassador with steady eyes. My grandmother once told me that the measure of a person is not how they treat their friends, but how they treat strangers in need. I think the same is true for species. The hall erupted in surprised chatter. Some aliens whispered that humans were proving their reputation as dangerous madmen. Others wondered if there was more to these Earth creatures than they had believed. The council speaker called for order. Very well. The Human Defense Corps is authorized to render assistance to the Velen Republic. May the stars guide you to a swift victory. His tone suggested he expected neither swiftness nor victory. As the meeting ended, other ambassadors approached the humans with mixtures of respect and pity. The Zephyrian spoke quietly to Lee. Captain, your courage honors your species, but Courage alone will not win this war. Maybe not, Lee agreed. But it is a good place to start. Dr. Park watched the other aliens file out of the hall. She noticed how they avoided looking directly at the humans, as if they were ashamed of their own refusal to help. They think we are walking to our deaths, she told Lee. They might be right, the captain replied. But someone has to try. Kethera remained behind as the hall emptied. Captain Lee, I must ask, why? Why risk everything for strangers? Lee thought for a moment before answering. On Earth we have a saying, evil wins when good people do nothing. Your people are good. The Devourers are evil. The choice is simple. The Velen ambassador's form brightened until she blazed like a small sun. I will return to my world and tell them that help comes. They will not believe me at first, but they will remember this day forever. Within hours, news of the human decision spread across the galaxy. On military bases and trading posts in government buildings and private homes, beings everywhere discussed the strange choice made by the Earth creatures. Admiral Kim Do-wan received the authorization while reviewing fleet positions in his office above the lunar shipyards. His aide, Commander Choi Hana, brought the orders with obvious concern on her face. Sir, the entire Third Fleet is being deployed to Velen space. That is 27 ships against an enemy that destroyed an entire star system in 3 days. Other Admiral looked out his window at the human ships docked below. They were not the sleekest vessels in the galaxy, nor the most advanced. But they were built by people who understood that sometimes you had to fight even when victory seemed impossible. Commander, send word to Captain Lee. Tell him his fleet will be ready to depart within 48 hours. And send this message. To all ship captains. We go not for glory or conquest, but because it is right. As the orders went out, something changed in human space. Civilian ships offered to carry supplies. Retired officers volunteered to return to service. Entire families said goodbye as their loved ones prepared for a journey that might have no return. On military news channels, reporters tried to explain why humans had chosen to fight. But the real answer was simpler than most aliens could understand. Humans had spent thousands of years on a world that tried to kill them every day. They had learned that survival sometimes meant standing up to things much bigger and stronger than yourself. The night before departure, Lee walked through his ship, the Iron Resolve. His crew prepared for battle with the calm efficiency of people who had trained for this moment their entire lives. They checked weapons, ran system diagnostics, and said quiet prayers to whatever gods they believed in. In the ship's chapel, Lee found Dr. Park lighting a candle for the journey ahead. Are you afraid? She asked him. Yes, he admitted. But fear has never stopped humans before. The doctor smiled. The other species do not understand us. They think we are reckless children playing with dangerous toys. They do not see that Earth taught us something they never learned. What is that? That sometimes the only choice is between fighting and dying on your knees. We choose to fight. As dawn broke over the lunar shipyards, the human fleet prepared to depart. 27 ships against an enemy that had conquered star systems. By all logical calculations, it was hopeless. But humans had never been very good at logic when people needed help. The fleet departed in formation, their engines leaving trails of fire against the star-filled darkness. Behind them, Earth continued, its ancient rotation, unaware that its children were about to teach the galaxy what it meant to be human. The die was cast. The Deathworlders were coming. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of what had once been the Velen system of Kethamora. Captain Lee Taman stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, staring at the main screen with growing horror. Where a beautiful, blue-green world should have been floating, only a gray shell remained. The planet's surface looked like an empty eggshell, cracked and lifeless. Strange metal structures covered what had once been continents, and massive pipes drained the remaining resources into space. Sir? Lieutenant Yoon Ji-ho called from his station, his voice shaking slightly. I am detecting 17 similar shells in this system alone. They have stripped every planet down to the core. Dr. Park Sora ran her scanners over the dead worlds. The atmospheric readings are impossible. They have taken everything, the air, the water, even the soil. It would take millions of years for life to return here naturally. Chief Engineer Nam Soo-jin joined them on the bridge, wiping grease from her hands. Captain, my people have never seen destruction like this. These machines, they do not just conquer worlds. They eat them. Through the ship's communication system, reports came in from other vessels in the fleet. Every ship captain described the same thing, complete devastation that stretched across multiple star systems. The Devourers had turned living worlds into empty husks. Sir, contact on long-range sensors, Ji-ho announced, multiple large objects moving toward our position. The main screen shifted to show shapes approaching through space. They were not ships in any sense that humans understood. Each one was the size of a moon, covered in mechanical arms and harvesting equipment. They moved with the slow, steady purpose of machines that had performed the same task thousands of times before. Battle stations, Lee ordered. All ships, prepare for contact with hostiles. The first Devourer harvester that approached the human fleet was larger than their biggest ship. Its surface crawled with mechanical appendages that looked like they could tear apart anything they touched. Strange lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at. Captain, Communications Officer Park Ji-young reported, they are broadcasting on multiple frequencies. The translation system is having trouble, but I think they are demanding our surrender. Tell them we decline, Lee replied. The Devourer ship responded by launching smaller craft toward the human fleet. These were sleek and fast, moving with mechanical precision. They opened fire with weapons that seemed to bend light itself, creating beams of energy that could slice through metal like paper. Return fire, Lee commanded. The human ships responded with their own weapons, missiles, plasma cannons, and railguns that fired metal slugs at tremendous speeds. The first exchange of fire lit up space with explosions and energy discharges. Lieutenant Yoon Ji-ho watched his tactical display with growing excitement. Sir, their shields are strong, but not perfect. Our kinetic weapons are getting through. They are not used to enemies that fight back, observed Dr. Park from her science station. Look at their attack patterns. They expect us to run or surrender. The battle was brief but intense. The human fleet's mobility gave them an advantage over the larger Devourer ships. Captain Jang Hyun-soo, commanding the fast corvette Dancing Blade, led attack runs that confused the enemy formations. They are trying to surround us, Jang reported over the communication channel. But they move like they are herding livestock, not fighting an enemy. The humans adapted quickly to Devourer tactics. They used hit-and-run attacks, striking fast and moving before the enemy could respond effectively. Within an hour, 3 Devourer ships were disabled and drifting in space. Cease fire, Lee ordered. Prepare boarding parties. We need to learn what we are facing. Sergeant Major Oh Dong-hyuk led the first boarding team onto a damaged Devourer vessel. What they found inside changed everything the humans thought they knew about their enemy. The ship's interior was a maze of organic and mechanical components, fused together in ways that seemed impossible. Walls pulsed with veins that carried glowing fluids. Computer systems grew like tumors from surfaces that looked more like skin than metal. This is not just a machine, O reported over his radio. It is alive, or was alive once. The boarding team pushed deeper into the ship, following corridors that twisted and turned like the inside of some giant creature. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows that seemed to move on their own. In what might have been a command center, they found the crew. The beings that controlled the ship were no longer fully organic or fully mechanical. They had been changed into something that was neither alive nor dead, connected to their vessel by cables and tubes that pulsed with the same energy that powered the ship. Captain, O's voice was tight with disgust. You need to see this. They have done something to themselves. Something terrible. The video feed from the boarding team's cameras showed the command crew of the Devourer ship. They had once been living beings, but now they were part of the ship itself. Mechanical parts replaced organs, and organic tissue grew around computer components. Their eyes, when they opened, showed no sign of individual consciousness, only hunger. Dr. Park studied the images with growing horror. They have given up their individual existence to become part of a collective, but not like a hive mind. This is different. They have traded their souls for immortality and endless hunger. One of the connected beings spoke, its voice a mixture of organic sound and mechanical noise. You cannot stop the harvest. All organic matter will feed the collective. Your resistance only delays the inevitable. Why? O asked. Why do this to yourselves and others? The creature's mechanical eyes focused on the human soldier. We were weak when we were separate. Now we are strong. We do not age. We do not die. We do not doubt. We only consume and grow stronger. But what is the point? O pressed. What do you want to achieve? To exist forever. To consume everything that lives. To end the pain of individual existence by making all things part of ourselves. The boarding team had heard enough. They planted explosive charges throughout the ship and evacuated back to their own vessels. When the charges detonated, the Devourer ship died screaming, a sound that was both mechanical and terrifyingly organic. Back aboard the Iron Resolve, Captain Lee studied the data collected from the enemy ship. The implications were worse than anyone had imagined. They are not just conquering civilizations, he told his senior officers. They are processing them, converting living beings into biomass to fuel their expansion. Chief Engineer Nam Soo-jin looked at the technical readouts with professional disgust. The organic components in their ships, they are made from the people they have captured. They are literally feeding on the civilizations they destroy. How many worlds have they consumed? Asked Commander Choi Hana, who had arrived with reinforcements from the main fleet. Dr. Park had been analyzing the data collected from the Devourer ship's computers. According to their records, they have been doing this for over 10,000 years. They have consumed hundreds of civilizations, billions of individual lives. The room fell silent as the scale of the horror became clear. This was not just war. It was genocide on a scale that defied comprehension. Sir, Lieutenant Yoon spoke up from his station. Incoming transmission from the outer system. It is heavily encrypted, but I think it might be Velen. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what looked like a hiding place. A group of Velen survivors huddled together, their crystalline forms dim with fear and exhaustion. Human ships. This is the last free colony in the Kethmora system. We have been hiding in the asteroid belt, but they are hunting us. Please, if you can hear this, we have information about the enemy. We know their weaknesses. Captain Lee leaned forward. This is Captain Lee Tae-min of the Human Defense Corps. We hear you. Can you reach our position? The Velen speaker, an older individual whose crystal body was cracked with age and stress, shook her head. We cannot move. Our ships are damaged and they have scouts searching everywhere. But we can transmit data about their technology. Do it, Lee ordered. For the next several hours, the Velen survivors transmitted everything they had learned about the Devourers. Technical specifications, tactical observations, and most importantly, recordings of what happened during the initial attacks. The recordings showed the true horror of Devourer methods. They did not simply kill their victims. They captured them alive and connected them to processing machines that slowly converted living tissue into the organic components needed for their ships and bodies. The worst part was that the victims remained conscious throughout the process, their minds absorbed into the collective consciousness that drove the Devourer fleet. They do not just want to kill us, Dr. Park realized with growing horror. They want to make us part of themselves. Every person they capture becomes another voice in their collective, another source of knowledge and memory. Captain Lee watched the final transmission from the Velen colony as Devourer ships found their hiding place. The recording ended in screams and the sound of tearing metal. Sir, Communications Officer Park Ji-young reported, we are receiving signals from across this region of space. Multiple civilizations are calling for help. The Devourers are not just attacking the Velens. They are harvesting everything in this entire sector. Lee looked around at his officers. Each face showed the same expression. Horror at 3 days after the first battle with the Devourers, Captain Jang Hyun-soo piloted his stealth frigate Shadow's Edge through the outer edges of enemy territory. His mission was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. Get close enough to a devourer processing ship to gather intelligence about their operations. The ship he approached was massive beyond imagination. It looked like a metal planet, covered in mechanical arms and processing facilities. Thousands of smaller vessels moved around it like insects around a hive, bringing captured materials to feed the hungry machines. Visual contact with the target, Zhang reported to his crew through the ship's internal communication. Beginning passive sensor sweep. The Shadow's Edge had been designed for exactly this kind of mission. Its hull was covered with materials that absorbed most kinds of scanning energy, making it nearly invisible to enemy sensors. The ship moved slowly through space, looking like just another piece of debris. Major Kang Mi-young, the fleet's intelligence specialist, monitored the sensor, readings from her station. What she saw made her stomach turn with disgust and rage. "Captain, I am detecting massive organic signatures inside that ship. Millions of life forms, but the readings are wrong. They are alive, but not functioning normally." Colonel Shin Woo-seok, the Special Forces commander, studied the tactical display. "Can you identify the species? Are any of them Velen?" "Multiple species," Kang replied, her voice growing tight with controlled anger. "I am detecting Velen crystal signatures, but also others. Some I do not recognize, which means they come from civilizations we have never met." As the Shadow's Edge drifted closer to the processing ship, its sensors picked up more disturbing details. The vessel was not just carrying prisoners, it was slowly converting them into the organic components that the Devourers needed for their hybrid technology. "Sir," whispered technical specialist Lee Sang-woo, the youngest member of the crew, "are we going to board that thing?" Captain Yang looked at the massive enemy ship through the bridge windows. Every instinct told him to turn around and flee. But his orders were clear: gather intelligence that could save millions of lives. "Yes," he answered simply. "Prepare the boarding pods." The approach took 4 hours of careful maneuvering. The Shadow's Edge attached itself to the hull of the processing ship like a parasite, using magnetic clamps to hold position. The boarding team, led by Colonel Shin, cut through the enemy hull with plasma torches and entered the nightmare within. The interior of the Devourer ship was worse than anything they had imagined. Corridors pulsed with organic fluids that flowed through transparent tubes. The walls themselves seemed alive, covered with tissue that grew around mechanical components like some horrible infection. "Stay together," Shin ordered his team through their radio communicators. "Document everything, but do not touch anything unless absolutely necessary." The boarding team moved through corridors that seemed designed by someone who had never been a living being themselves. Passages split and merged randomly. Stairs led to walls instead of floors. The layout made no sense to organic minds. They found the first processing chamber after 20 minutes of careful exploration. What they saw there would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species were connected to machines that slowly converted their living tissue into organic components. The victims were alive and conscious, their eyes showing the terrible awareness of what was happening to them. "My God," whispered Corporal Yoon Seok-jin, one of the youngest soldiers on the team. "They are still aware. They can see us." The prisoners tried to speak, but the machines had already begun converting their vocal systems. Only their eyes could communicate the desperate hope that anyone had come to help them. Major Kang worked quickly to record everything her scanners detected. "Colonel, these processing machines are incredibly sophisticated. They are not just harvesting tissue. They are integrating the prisoners' memories and knowledge into the collective consciousness, which means every person they capture makes them smarter. Every civilization they consume gives them new knowledge about technology, tactics, and weaknesses of other species." Shin felt his anger growing colder and more focused. This was not just murder. It was a form of theft that violated everything he understood about individual dignity and freedom. The team moved deeper into the ship, finding chamber after chamber of processing equipment. In some areas they found beings who had been recently captured and were still fully organic. In others, they discovered creatures that had been partially converted, their bodies a horrible mixture of living tissue and mechanical parts. "Sir, over here," called Sergeant Park Junho from a side passage. "I think I found something important." The team gathered around a large chamber filled with what looked like computer servers, but made from organic material. Brains from dozens of species floated in nutrient tanks, connected by cables to processing systems that hummed with activity. "This is their central processing unit," Kang realized with growing horror. "They are using living brains as biological computers. Every mind they capture becomes part of their thinking system." One of the floating brains belonged to a Velen. Its crystalline structure pulsed with dim light, and somehow, impossibly, it spoke to them through the ship's communication system. "Human soldiers." The voice was weak but clear. "I am scientist Veltar of the Kethmora Research Station. I have been connected to their system for 37 days. They are using my knowledge of Velen technology to improve their weapons." Colonel Shin approached the tank carefully. "Can you tell us how to stop them?" "Their weakness is their strength," Veltar replied. "They are all connected in one giant network. If you can disrupt the central nodes, the entire system will collapse. But you must understand, they know everything I know now. They are learning about humans through my memories of our first contact." The implications hit the boarding team, like a physical blow. The Devourers were not just consuming civilizations, they were absorbing their knowledge and using it to become more effective predators. "How many civilizations have they processed?" Shin asked. "Hundreds," Veltar answered. "Perhaps thousands. They have knowledge spanning tens of thousands of years. Technology from species that mastered space travel before humans learned to make fire." As if responding to their conversation, the ship's internal systems suddenly came alive. Mechanical, arms extended from walls and ceilings reaching for the human intruders. Warning lights flashed and alarms began to sound. "They know we are here," Shin announced. "Everyone back to the boarding pods, move." The team ran through the twisted corridors as the ship's defenses awakened around them. Mechanical creatures that looked like spiders the size of humans dropped from ceiling vents to chase them. Walls tried to close off passages, attempting to trap the intruders. Technical specialist Lee Sang-woo proved his worth during the escape. As the youngest member of the team, he was also the fastest and most agile. He led them through passages that older soldiers might not have been able to navigate, jumping over closing barriers and sliding under descending obstacles. "This way," he called, leading them toward the outer hull where their boarding pods waited. Behind them, the pursuing mechanical creatures made sounds that were part machine noise and part organic screaming. The combination was more terrifying than either sound would have been alone. The team reached their boarding pods with only minutes to spare. As they sealed the hatches and prepared to return to the shadow's edge, they could hear the Devourer ship's hull reforming around the holes they had cut to enter. Captain Jang had the engines ready for immediate departure. The moment the boarding pods docked with his ship, he activated the stealth systems and began moving away from the processing vessel. "Did anyone follow us?" he asked Colonel Shin. "I do not think so, but we cannot be certain. These creatures are unlike anything in our experience. They might have ways of tracking us that we do not understand." Back aboard the Iron Resolve, Captain Lee Taman studied the recordings and data that the boarding team had collected. Each piece of information made the situation seem more hopeless. "They have the accumulated knowledge of hundreds of civilizations," Dr. Park Sora noted as she analyzed the intelligence reports. "Technology, tactics, scientific knowledge, everything that each consumed species knew is now part of their collective memory." "But they are still vulnerable," Lee replied, thinking about what the Velen scientist had told them. "They are all connected. That connection is their strength, but it might also be their weakness." Communications Officer Park Ji-young approached, the captain with a worried expression. "Sir, we are receiving distress calls from 17 different systems. The Devourers are not just attacking randomly, they are conducting a coordinated campaign across this entire region of space." Admiral Kim Do-won's image appeared on the main communication screen, transmitted from the command ship of the reinforcement fleet that was still days away from reaching them. "Captain Lee, I have read your reports about the enemy capabilities. I am ordering you to withdraw immediately. You are facing an enemy that has consumed hundreds of civilizations. Your small fleet cannot possibly win against such odds. Lee looked around at his. The first Devourer Harvester fleet died screaming. Commander Bayek Tae-young led his squadron of fast attack ships through the enemy formation, like wolves hunting in a pack. His tactics were simple, brutal, and completely unlike anything the Devourers had experienced in 10,000 years of conquest. Blue Squadron, hit the processing arms, Beck commanded over the tactical channel. Red Squadron, target their sensor arrays, make them blind and helpless. The human ships moved with a coordination that seemed impossible for independent vessels. They struck simultaneously from multiple directions, concentrating their fire on specific weak points that Dr. Lim Yoon-ji had identified through careful analysis of captured Devourer technology. Target destroyed, reported Lieutenant Kim Min-seo from her fighter. Moving to secondary objective. The Devourer ships tried to respond with their usual tactics, surrounding the attackers and using superior numbers to overwhelm them. But the humans refused to cooperate with enemy expectations. Instead of standing and fighting like traditional fleets, the human ships scattered and regrouped in patterns that made no logical sense. They appeared to retreat, drawing Devourer pursuers into carefully prepared ambushes. They used asteroid fields and debris clouds as cover, turning the battlefield environment into a weapon. Master Sergeant Park Jun-ho watched the battle from the bridge of the Iron Resolve and smiled with professional satisfaction. They fight like machines, he observed to Captain Lee. Efficient, logical, predictable. They have forgotten how to adapt. And we fight like humans, Lee replied. Angry, stubborn humans who refuse to lose. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 12 Devourer ships had been destroyed or disabled, and their processing facilities had been completely wrecked. More importantly, over 50,000 prisoners had been freed from the enemy ships. The rescued beings represented 17 different species, some of whom humans had never encountered before. They were in terrible condition, malnourished, traumatized, and showing the early signs of forced conversion to Devourer hybrid status. Dr. Park So-ra established medical facilities aboard the human ships to care for the refugees. What she learned from them changed the humans' understanding of the enemy they faced. The Devourers do not just consume civilizations randomly, she reported to Captain Lee after interviewing dozens of survivors. They have a specific pattern. They target species with advanced technology first, absorbing their knowledge before moving on to less developed worlds. Which explains why they are so dangerous, Lee realized. Every conquest makes them stronger and smarter. One of the rescued prisoners was a being called Mordak, who belonged to a species that looked like walking crystals, but moved with liquid grace. His people had been spacefaring for over 2,000 years before the Devourers found them. Human Captain, Mordak spoke through a translation device that Dr. Park had modified for his unique physiology. Your tactics are unlike anything in the Devourer database. They have knowledge from hundreds of conquered civilizations, but none fought as you do. How did other species resist them, Lee asked. They did not resist, Mordak replied with what might have been sadness. They fought bravely but conventionally. Fleet against fleet, technology against technology. The Devourers always had superior numbers and absorbed knowledge. Conventional tactics always failed. Lieutenant Yoon Ji-ho, who had been analyzing battle data, looked up from his station. Sir, I have been studying their response patterns. The enemy ships are trying to adapt to our tactics, but they are making mistakes. What kind of mistakes? They expect us to follow logical patterns, based on their historical data. When we do something that makes no sense according to their programming, they freeze for several seconds while trying to process the information. Dr. Lim Yoon-ji had been working around the clock to develop new weapons based on captured Devourer technology. Her breakthrough came when she realized that the enemy's strength was also their greatest weakness. Captain, she announced during the daily briefing, the Devourer's hybrid organic-mechanical nature makes them vulnerable to specific types of attacks. I have modified our weapons to target their neural networks directly. Explain. Their consciousness exists in both organic and mechanical components simultaneously. If we can disrupt the connection between these systems, we can cause them tremendous pain and confusion. I have developed ammunition that releases electromagnetic pulses specifically tuned to interfere with their neural pathways. The first test of the new weapons came during an attack on a Devourer scouting formation. Instead of destroying the enemy ships quickly, the humans used Dr. Lim's neural disruptor ammunition to disable their crews while leaving the vessels intact. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The Devourer ships began broadcasting on all frequencies, not tactical communications but screams of pain and confusion. For the first time in millennia, the collective consciousness that controlled their fleets experienced something they had forgotten: fear. "They are trying to retreat," observed Commander Choi Hana with satisfaction. "They do not know how to handle an enemy that fights back effectively." But the humans were not finished with psychological warfare. Captain Lee authorized a plan that would have horrified most civilized species, but was perfectly natural to people from Earth. "Begin broadcasting the enemy distress calls on all frequencies they use," Lee ordered. "Let every Devourer ship in this sector hear their comrades screaming." The psychological effect was devastating. Devourer formations began to show signs of hesitation and uncertainty. Ships that had moved with mechanical precision for thousands of years started making tactical errors. Master Sergeant Park Jun-ho led boarding parties onto disabled Devourer vessels, not to gather intelligence but to rescue more prisoners and plant devices that would disrupt enemy communications. "The boarding actions are having an effect beyond just tactical success," he reported after his fifth such mission. "The Devourers are starting to fear close combat. They have never faced enemies willing to board their ships and fight hand-to-hand." The reason was simple but important. The Devourers had absorbed knowledge from hundreds of species, but all of those species had been civilized peoples who fought at a distance with advanced technology. None of them had been warriors who were willing to look their enemies in the eyes and kill them with knives and bare hands. Humans were different. Earth had produced people who understood that sometimes the only way to win was to get close to your enemy and hurt them personally. Technical specialist Lee Sang-woo proved to be particularly gifted at this kind of combat. Despite being the youngest member of most boarding teams, he showed an intuitive understanding of Devourer ship layouts and weaknesses. "They designed their ships for efficiency, not defense," he explained to the other soldiers. "They never expected to be boarded by enemies, so their internal security is minimal." During one particularly successful boarding action, Sang-woo's team managed to capture a partially converted Devourer crew member who still retained some individual consciousness. The interrogation revealed crucial information about enemy operations. "The collective consciousness is having difficulty processing your tactics," the prisoner explained in a voice that was part organic and part mechanical. "Your behavior does not match any patterns in our historical database. The central processing nodes are requesting new strategic algorithms." "How long will it take them to adapt?" demanded Sergeant Park. "Unknown. We have never encountered sustained resistance before. Our adaptive protocols were designed for civilizations that eventually surrender or are destroyed. We do not have procedures for enemies that refuse to lose." The information confirmed what the humans had suspected. They were fighting an enemy that had become over-specialized for fighting civilized opponents. The Devourer's greatest strength, their accumulated knowledge, was useless against humans who fought in ways that no previous civilization had attempted. News of human victories began to spread across the galaxy. Other species monitored the communications from the war zone with growing amazement. The primitive Deathworlders were not just surviving against the Devourers, they were winning. On the Zephyrian homeworld, military analysts studied reports of human tactics with professional interest. "They fight without honor," observed General Kreshitar, his golden wings folding in disapproval. "Using psychological warfare, attacking disabled enemies, deliberately causing unnecessary suffering." "But they are effective," replied his aide. "Our models suggest that conventional tactics would have failed against the Devourers within days. The humans have been fighting for weeks and continue to gain ground." Similar discussions took place on worlds throughout the galaxy. The civilized species were disturbed by human methods but could not argue with human results. Admiral Kim Do-won arrived with reinforcements just as Captain Lee's fleet achieved their greatest victory yet, the complete destruction of a year-hour devourer processing facility that had been converting captured beings for over 50 years. Captain Lee, your reports have been interesting to read, the Admiral said during their first face-to-face meeting since the campaign began. Your tactics are unconventional, to say the least. Sir, conventional tactics would have gotten us all killed in the first week, Lee replied. The Devourers know how to defeat civilized enemies. They do not know how to defeat angry Huh. The Devourer stronghold appeared on the main screen like a metal cancer growing around a dead star. What had once been a solar system was now a massive construction project that stretched across billions of kilometers of space. Entire planets had been converted into processing facilities, connected by streams of energy and matter that flowed like arteries in some impossible organism. Vice Admiral Song Min-ho stood beside Captain Lee Tae-min on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, studying the enemy fortress with professional assessment. The reinforcement fleet had brought their total strength to 87 ships, still tiny compared to the thousands of Devourer vessels that protected the stronghold. Intelligence estimates over 50 million prisoners are being held in that facility, Song reported, his voice carefully controlled. Beings from over 300 different species, some of whom we have never encountered before. Dr. Park Sora had been analyzing sensor data for the past 6 hours. The central structure appears to be both a command center and a massive processing facility. If we can disrupt it, we might be able to cause a system-wide failure in their collective consciousness. And if we fail? Asked Commander Choi Hana. Then everyone dies, Lee replied simply. The prisoners, us, and eventually every free civilization in the galaxy. Technical specialist Lee Sang-woo, now promoted to lieutenant for his actions during the boarding missions, had discovered something important during his analysis of captured Devourer technology. Sir, I think I have found their central weakness. The collective consciousness has grown so large that it requires massive amounts of processing power to maintain itself. If we can overload their central computing systems, the entire network might collapse. How do we overload systems that use the brains of millions of captured beings? Song asked. By forcing them to process information they cannot understand, Sang-woo replied with a grin that reminded everyone why humans were considered dangerous. I have been working with Dr. Lim to develop a data weapon based on human psychological concepts that the Devourers have never encountered. Dr. Lim Yoonji joined the briefing, carrying a device that looked like a standard communication array, but had been modified with components that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. This Devourer's collective mind processes information based on pure logic and efficiency, she explained. But human consciousness includes elements that cannot be reduced to logical algorithms: creativity, irrationality, hope, and love. And we are going to broadcast human emotional patterns directly into their collective consciousness. Their systems are not designed to process illogical information. The contradictions should cause cascade failures throughout their network. Captain Hwang Yu-jin, commander of the carrier Earth's Fury, had been studying the tactical situation. Even if we can disrupt their command systems, we still have to fight through thousands of enemy ships to reach the central facility. We will not fight through them, Lee replied. We will go around them, under them, and through them simultaneously. The Devourers expect logical attack patterns. We are going to give them chaos. The battle plan was insane by any conventional military standard. The human fleet would split into dozens of small groups, each taking a different route to the central facility. Some groups would attack directly, others would circle around to strike from unexpected angles. A few ships would even attempt to hide among the debris fields and wreckage that surrounded the stronghold. They will try to coordinate their defense, Song observed. Their collective consciousness gives them perfect communication. Not if we jam their communications with contradiction bombs, Sang-woo pointed out. Every time they try to coordinate, we broadcast conflicting orders and emotional chaos into their network. The assault began at dawn, ship's time. The human fleet scattered like seeds in the wind, each group following its own path toward the heart of the enemy stronghold. The Devourers responded exactly as predicted, trying to coordinate a logical defense against multiple simultaneous attacks. But logic failed them. Every time their collective consciousness tried to process the human attack patterns, the contradiction bombs filled their networks with emotional chaos and paradoxical information. Ships received conflicting orders. Processing. Facilities tried to execute impossible commands. The perfect coordination that had made them invincible for millennia began to break down. Lieutenant Yoon Ji-ho, now commanding his own destroyer, led his ship through a debris field that had once been a planet. His mission was to draw enemy fire away from the main assault groups, and he performed it with the kind of reckless courage that made other species call humans insane. Enemy squadron approaching from Sector 7, his tactical officer reported. 12 heavy cruisers closing fast. Let them come, Ji-ho replied. All weapons prepare to fire. Show them what happens when they corner a human. The battle that followed would be remembered as one of the most brilliant examples of David defeating Goliath in military history. Ji-ho's single destroyer danced between the enemy cruisers, using their size against them and turning their formation into a confused mess where they were as likely to hit each other as their intended target. Meanwhile, Captain Jang Hyun-soo led a group of fast frigates on a direct assault against the central facility's outer defenses. His ships moved like sharks through water, striking hard and fast before disappearing into the maze of mechanical structures. Breach in the outer perimeter, Jang reported over the tactical network. We have a clear path to the processing centers. But the most crucial mission belonged to Captain Lee himself. The Iron Resolve, carrying Dr. Lim's emotional warfare device, had to reach the central command complex and upload the data weapon directly into the Devourer collective consciousness. The journey through the stronghold was like flying through the intestines of some mechanical god. Passages twisted and turned in ways that defied physics. Automated defenses fired at them from directions that should not have existed. The very structure of the place seemed designed to drive organic minds insane. Sir, Communications Officer Park Ji-young called from her station. I am receiving transmissions from the processing facilities. The prisoners know we are here. They are trying to help us. The main screen showed images from inside the Devourer processing centers. Millions of beings from hundreds of species were still alive, still conscious, still hoping for rescue. Some had managed to sabotage their conversion machinery. Others were broadcasting information about Devourer defenses. They have been fighting. This entire time, Dr. Park realized with growing amazement. Even while being converted, they never stopped resisting. Chief Engineer Nam Soo-jin worked frantically to keep the Iron Resolve functioning as enemy fire tore through their hull. Captain, we have lost main engines and most of our weapons. We are running on backup power. Can you get us to the central command complex? Maybe. But we will not have power for weapons or shields. Do it. The Iron Resolve limped through the final kilometers to the heart of the Devourer stronghold. The central command complex was a nightmare of organic and mechanical components, fused together into something that hurt to look at. Massive structures that might have been buildings or organs pulsed with energy that flowed like blood through transparent tubes. There, Lieutenant Sang-woo pointed to a structure that looked like a mechanical brain the size of a city. That is their central processing core. If we can upload the emotional chaos directly into that system, it will spread throughout their entire network. The Iron Resolve docked with the command complex using magnetic grapples and cutting lasers. Captain Lee led the boarding party personally, carrying Dr. Lim's weapon into the heart of enemy territory. The interior of the complex was worse than anything they had seen before. Corridors were lined with brains from thousands of species, all connected by cables and tubes that pulsed with the flow of information and nutrients. The collective consciousness was not just a computer system, it was a living thing, made from the minds of everyone the Devourers had ever captured. This way, Dr. Park guided them through passages that seemed to change configuration as they walked. The central processing unit should be directly ahead. They found it in a chamber that was larger than most buildings. The Devourer Collective, Consciousness existed as a massive structure of connected brains and computer systems, all working together to control the vast empire of machines and converted beings. At the center of it all was the original Devourer consciousness, the first being of their species to undergo conversion from organic to hybrid form. It had grown over the millennia, absorbing the knowledge and personalities of billions of victims. So, it spoke through speakers that were scattered throughout the chamber. The Deathworlders have reached my heart. You understand that killing me will not save your species. My children exist throughout the galaxy. They will continue the harvest. We are not here to kill you, Lee replied, setting up Dr. Lim's device. We are here to teach you something your species forgot a long time ago. And what is that? What it feels like to be individual. What it feels like to hope and fear and love and lose. What it feels like to be truly alive. Dr. Lim activated the emotional warfare device. Instantly the chamber fee. 1 year after the fall of the Great Devourer stronghold, Captain Lee Tae-min stood on the observation deck of the newly renamed Station Hope's Light, watching ships from dozens of species work together to build something that had never existed before, a truly united galactic community. The station had once been a devourer processing facility, a place of horror and death. Now it served as the headquarters for the Galactic Rescue and Rehabilitation Service, coordinating efforts to help the billions of beings who had been freed from collective enslavement. The morning reports, Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Yoon. Ji-ho presented Lee with a data tablet. The young officer had been promoted several times for his actions during the war, but he still preferred to serve under Lee's command. Lee smiled at the title. The promotion to Admiral had come with the new responsibilities, but he still thought of himself as a ship captain first. How many new settlements were established this week? 17. The Velans are leading a joint effort to restore their homeworld, with assistance from 6 other species. The crystalline beings from the Mordak system have chosen to establish a new colony near human space. They say they want to learn more about individual creativity. Through the station's massive windows, Lee could see the restored Velan homeworld, spinning slowly in space. What had been a dead shell a year ago was now green and blue again, with cities that sparkled like jewels in the sunlight. The sight never failed to fill him with quiet satisfaction. Dr. Park Sora joined them at the observation window, carrying her own stack of reports. Her work had shifted from studying alien psychology to helping former collective members adjust to individual consciousness. The psychological rehabilitation programs are showing excellent progress, she reported. 93% of former Devourer collective members have successfully integrated into independent society. The remaining 7% have chosen to form small communities where they maintain limited collective consciousness by choice, rather than force. And they are happy with that arrangement? Lee asked. Happier than they have been in centuries. The difference between chosen unity and forced unity is the difference between love and slavery. Ambassador Han Su-bin approached their group, having just arrived from the Galactic Coalition Council chambers. Her diplomatic uniform was perfectly pressed, but Lee could see the tiredness around her eyes that came from months of difficult negotiations. How did the council meeting go? He asked. Han smiled with genuine satisfaction. Better than we had hoped. The coalition has formally adopted the individual rights charter that we proposed. Every member species has agreed to guarantee the basic right of all sentient beings to maintain individual consciousness, including the species that originally refused to help the Velans, especially them. The Zephyrian Empire has issued a formal apology for their inaction. The Corvan Federation has donated an entire fleet to patrol duties in former Devourer territory. Even the Trade Consortium is providing free shipping for refugee resettlement efforts. General Ryu Kyung-min materialized as a hologram from his headquarters on the former Devourer homeworld. The conversion of their capital planet into a multi-species research center had been one of the most ambitious projects in galactic history. Admiral Lee, I have an update on the conversion project. The former Devourer technology has been completely repurposed for peaceful applications. We now have the most advanced medical facilities in known space, capable of healing injuries and illnesses that were previously impossible to treat. Any resistance from the remaining Devourer populations? None. The individuals who choose to maintain their hybrid nature are working as researchers and engineers. They say that experiencing individual consciousness has given them perspectives they never had as part of the collective. Dr. Cho Won-sik, the lead scientist studying Devourer technology, appeared on another communication channel. His excitement was obvious even through the holographic transmission. "Admiral, we have made a breakthrough in understanding how their collective processing systems worked. We believe we can adapt the technology to create voluntary collective consciousness networks for complex scientific projects." Voluntary being the key word, Lee emphasized. "Absolutely. Complete individual choice, with the ability to disconnect at any time. Think of it as a temporary joining of minds for specific purposes like solving complex mathematical problems or coordinating large-scale engineering projects." The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the station's communications center. Lieutenant Park Ji-young, now promoted to communications director, appeared on the main display. "Admiral, we have received a priority transmission from the Outer Rim. It appears to be from a previously unknown civilization requesting assistance against what they describe as metal creatures that consume worlds." Lee felt a familiar stirring in his chest, the same feeling he had experienced when Cathara first asked for help in the Coalition Council chambers. Are they describing Devourers? Possibly a remnant group that escaped the collapse of the main collective. The transmission is coming from a region of space we have never explored before. Dr. Park looked at the star charts with professional interest. That sector is over 6 months' journey from here. If there are isolated Devourer groups still operating, they represent a continued threat to any civilizations they encounter. And if we respond, Han observed, it will be the same situation as before, a dangerous journey to help people we have never met. Lee looked around at his assembled staff, beings from multiple species who had chosen to work together not because they were forced to, but because they believed in the same principles of individual freedom and mutual assistance. "Lieutenant. Commander Yoon, what is the current status of the Rapid Response Fleet?" 23 ships ready for immediate deployment, sir. Mixed crews from 15 different species, all volunteers. Dr. Park, how many of our people have experience dealing with Devourer psychology and technology? About 40% of our research staff. More than enough to handle a remnant group. Lee made his decision with the same certainty he had felt a year ago when facing impossible odds. "We go. Prepare the fleet for departure within 72 hours." "Sir," Han said quietly, "the Coalition Council has not authorized this mission. Some members might object to unilateral human action." "Then, we do not ask for authorization. We do what needs to be done." The reaction from his staff was immediate and unanimous. No one questioned the decision. No one suggested waiting for official approval. They had learned something during the war against the Devourers. Sometimes the right choice was obvious, even when it was dangerous. As preparations began for the new mission, Lee found himself thinking about how much had changed in just 1 year. Humanity had entered galactic society as primitive Deathworlders barely tolerated by civilized species. Now they were looked upon as protectors and teachers, examples of how individual courage could overcome any obstacle. But the most important change was not in how other species viewed humans. It was in how the galaxy viewed itself. The old coalition had been a collection of species that talked about cooperation while avoiding real commitment to each other. The new galactic community was built on the principle that had driven humans to answer the Velen's call for help. When someone needs assistance, you help them, regardless of the cost or risk to yourself. Dr. Lim Yoon-ji brought her latest research reports to the final briefing before departure. "Admiral, I have been studying the long-term effects of our emotional warfare technology on former collective consciousness systems. The results are fascinating." "In what way?" "The beings who were freed from collective control are showing increased creativity, problem-solving ability, and emotional resilience compared to their original baseline measurements. It appears that the experience of regaining individual consciousness after losing it has made them stronger than they were before." "Stronger how?" "They value their individual identity more highly because they know what it is like to lose it. They are more willing to cooperate with others because they understand the difference between chosen cooperation and forced unity. They have become natural ambassadors for the principles of individual freedom. The night before departure, Lee walked through the residential sections of Hope's Light, talking with the beings who had chosen to make the station their home. Families from dozens of species lived and worked together, their children playing games that mixed traditions from multiple worlds. He stopped to watch a group of young beings from 6 different species working together on an art project that combined vellum crystal work with human painting techniques and Mordak liquid sculpture. The result was beautiful in ways that no single species could have achieved alone. "Admiral," one of the children called to him, "look what we made." The artwork showed the galaxy as a garden, with each star system represented as a different type of flower. Ships moved between the stars like pollinating insects, carrying ideas and friendship from world to world. "It is beautiful," Lee told them honestly. "What gave you the idea?" "We wanted to show how the galaxy looks now," explained a young Velen, whose crystal form sparkled with excitement. "Before, everyone stayed in their own space and did not talk to each other much. Now everyone works together and helps each other.